It's Tuesday, July 10th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Rich Hribar. You know him, you love him. Sharp football stats, sharp football analysis, at Lord Reeves himself. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, brother? It's always good to get on the show and talk to you. I hope I get to see you in person next month. But anytime I get to talk with you, man, is always a gift. So hopefully we bring some cook up something for the audience here, and they like what we have to say.
Oh, I know I'm going to really like this episode. I've been looking forward to it for a while. You and I have been kicking it back and forth about this topic for a little bit now. Before we get to that, I also just want to let everybody know we're also going to speak with Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze at the end of this show, get his perspective on young wide receivers adjusting to the league, how he's adjusting to the Ben Johnson era. So look forward to my interview with Rome at the end of the show. But we are continuing our little mini series here, Contrarian Corner, on the podcast. Just a little look at some stuff leading up to training camps before those open up and the wave of daily news just washes over us. We're just trying to poke some holes maybe in the consensus fantasy groupthink heading into the 2025 season. Little devil's advocate, basically, at the heart of fantasy draft season kickoff here. And I especially wanted you for this episode, Rich, for two specific reasons. One, I think you are perfectly comfortable, maybe calling out and going against the fantasy hive mind. And two, buddy, this is a wide receiver episode, and I wanted somebody, and I'm not saying this, I feel this way about you. I'm not saying this just to gas you up here on the episode. I wanted somebody that if I'm dead wrong about this little contrarian idea, that I would be totally comfortable you saying to me, no, you're totally wrong about this. Like, there's no problem here. Just shut up and go with the flow. So for those two reasons, you were perfect for this episode.
Listen, I'll take it. You can gas me up all you want. I'm willing to accept all anything, any accolades you want to give me. I'll accept.
Well, perfect. So today, our big question here, our Contrarian Corner thought exercise is: what if we're wrong about who the best wide receivers in the NFL are? Maybe more better said, what if our wide receiver rankings this year are just totally wrong? And what got me thinking about this exercise was kind of putting together my real life wide receiver rankings, actually my top 10 at the wide receiver position for Football 301. The graphic is up here for our YouTube folks. And I did a real life wide receiver tiers episode for NFL Daily with Greg Rosenthal and Patrick Claybon. And honestly, Rich, like what I found when I was putting those together is that I think the first two tiers are relatively set. Like I think it's relatively clear. Like I think tier one, just in terms of real life, the rankings on the screen are not fantasy rankings. Okay, to be clear. So if you're looking at this, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Puka Nacua. I think those are the first tier of like elite NFL receivers right now. And I also felt like pretty clear that 7, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8, Malik Neighbors, and 9, Drake London. Like I felt pretty comfortable that that's kind of our second tier of guys, but I admittedly put Tyreek Hill at number 10 just as a pure coward move, especially because before that I had not charted him for reception perception, but I'm actually pretty comfortable now. I think he's in decline. Like, so I actually don't even know if I'd have him at 10 in this exercise, but from 10 really to like, I don't know, wide receiver 37, I actually felt that the overall talent level was fairly flat. So my thought here, Rich, and again, I'll throw it to you on this, is just that I feel as if what looks like a very clear group of players from a fantasy ranking perspective, league-wide, I'm actually like more willing to think that we could be totally wrong about, I don't know, any of these players, but especially like wide receivers 10 to 15, maybe some guys that we're not expecting can jump into that range.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that stands out from your list to me is something we've talked about, for a while, is that just, the nuance of the wide receiver position, how it's changed. We've converted from the running your offense through that prototypical X receiver, the AJ Greens, the Julio Joneses, the Andre Johnsons, right? And you've got these guys that now are moving across the formation. And that's just the way the NFL offensive had to kind of counter the defensive meta of, more zone coverage, less man coverage, a lot more too high stuff. and you want to get the ball to your best players. So these guys are now these guys that can move into the slot. You can give them quick hitters, these kind of free squares if you're in your PPR leagues, but then they can also do other things, win in man coverage, win one-on-one, win in isolation on the outside. And basically everyone that you have on that list has like given us a top-down example of having that kind of duality of being able to do a little bit of everything. And that's what fantasy football has changed. What's cool about fantasy football too is like, we know like the best wide receivers are, but we know that there's just like a ton of fluidity in who the best wide receiver is for fantasy football. We've had a wide receiver 1 overall different in 8 straight seasons. And what's even more unique about that is we've had 8 different players be the wide receiver 1. It's not like we've had a guy like Justin Jefferson was wide receiver 1, then 2 years later he was the wide receiver 1 again. It's 8 different players. In standard leagues, it's been 9 different players in a row have been the wide receiver 1 overall. So even though Jamar Chase is the consensus 101, we kind of know that there is some volatility here and the field is more open than ever in terms of running these guys down. We have to go back to Antonio Brown as like the guy that like kind of gave us some stability and just being the top dog.
That's a great point. I hadn't even thought about it that way, but it sort of kind of reminds me of, like shout out to Ryan McDowell, one of the GOATs, over there at Dynasty League Football. We talked about like the productive struggle from a dynasty standpoint. And like you want to build your teams around these productive wide receivers because they're the more consistent position year to year. And that's just like one part of it. They're just the more consistent position year to year. Like the good wide receivers stay good. But that doesn't mean that it's just always going to line up like the best wide receivers in football are just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, like down the fantasy rankings because, I mean, this is my whole thing is like wide receiver production is so inherently dependent on outside variables. Like talent, yes, like you earn targets and all that. You earn opportunities. Sometimes targets are earned. Sometimes targets are designed, whatever. Yeah. There's like a lot of nuances there. But I think it's gotten a little too, like the targets are earned thing has gotten a little too, we've jumped the shark on that. Anyways, my point being there is that like, yes, you do earn opportunities and like consistently get on the field because of your talent. But in order for that to then turn into fantasy points, you obviously need good quarterbacks. You need good situations. You need good ecosystem, all of those things. And that is very volatile year to year. So that's, again, sort of like beyond the point of just like, yes, that's variable year to year. You're right to look at that, like, that top 10 again, really the only guy there that's a pure X receiver is Nico Collins. Like all these other guys, even like, I mean, and again, some of these guys could run out and play X on every single snap. Like AJ Brown could do it. Justin Jefferson could do it. Jamar Chase could do it. Malik Neighbors actually was pretty X heavy, maybe more than I thought he was going to be in year 1. But the guy that's like 80 outside on the line of scrimmage, the only one there is Nico Collins. And Rich, I actually think, not to make this a Nico Collins discussion because he wasn't one of the guys I wanted to focus on, I actually think that there's a chance with Nick Caley coming in and then drafting Jaden Higgins, like there's a chance he might get more opportunities to like move around the formation this year, which is pretty terrifying to think.
Yeah, I believe he will. I mean, I was writing them up, and the interesting dynamic is because Christian Kirk is, although he is a more slot forward player, he's more in like the Tank Dell spectrum of like he wins vertically. Like he's not one of these low A-dot slot guys. So you can do some creative things with Christian Kirk, coming over, because when you look at him compared to like the Jaden Reeds, the Josh Downs, and the Khalil Shakir is like, I think like the best slot receivers. I think Christian Kirk's in that bucket. His depth of target and his deep target rate is significantly higher than all those guys, except for Jaden Reed gets a lot of the deep post stuff, right? Like Jaden Reed's running those post routes, but he gets a significantly higher ADOT. So they can do some creative things with Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, I mean, was kind of when you look at how the free agency kind of played out the money, the Tutu Atwell's getting the 10 mil and stuff, like just a very shrewd move to throw that 7th round pick at him. Like that's going to be one I think we look back at and say like, yep, that was a pretty sharp play by Houston.
Yeah, Nick Caserio kind of has and it's funny, I when I was at Sloan this year, he actually was one of the on one of the panels, and he talked a lot about these, like, this is not how he framed it, but to me, like, and this sounds disrespectful, but like scraping the bottom of the barrel for like every sort of like weird way you can find veteran value. And I think that Christian Kirk is a great example of that. And honestly, like even if Christian Kirk doesn't work out, Jalen Noel can do all of those things as well. The guy that they took in the third round, the other Iowa State receiver. So they have like sort of a maybe a backup plan or a succession plan there as well. So yeah, again, I don't want to turn this into a Nico Collins discussion, but
just the whole Houston offense. I mean, the Jaden Higgins has to be mad that he can't get away from Jalen Noel, because we would love to see Jaden Higgins get some of that stuff. I can't remember the reception perception Jaden Higgins profile, but Jaden Higgins, when I was kind of digging into him, I wanted him to get more of, like, he was roadblocked by Jalen Noel, but I wanted him to get more of that interior stuff, because when he had to just
exactly
when he just had to win. When he just had to win one-on-one, that was when kind of some of the stuff like happened. He kind of propped up in his profile. You're like, ooh, I don't know if he's going to get away with that in the NFL. But
yeah, same. That is exactly the reception perception takeaway. Like, it was very similar to, and I don't think these guys are necessarily similar players, but it's kind of similar to like Keon Coleman last year, where I really think that Keon Coleman's a guy that would thrive moving around the formation, not just being tethered at X receiver. Like, you kind of profile him as that like size-based player. That's exactly what the Bills did. They just stuck him out there at X receiver. And yeah, obviously we're showing the route tree on YouTube right now for Jaden Higgins. Like, I think he would be more maximized as a separator if he wasn't just tethered at X, which obviously with Nico Collins there, he's not going to be. But I do think him playing some X receiver will maximize Nico Collins to the way that, like, I do think that Nico should be like a consensus first round fantasy pick this year. I think wide receiver 1 overall is very much in his range of outcomes this season, because he is clearly one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But let's move to kind of some other guys here. And I actually have like 3 premises for why this contrarian corner idea was sort of kicking around in my head. Premise number 1 to me, Rich, is that I still think that the 2022 wide receiver draft class is one of the most unlucky groups I can remember. And I think this was a very, very good wide receiver class. I think it's actually talent level on par with some of the guys from last year in 2024, which was heralded as a historic wide receiver class. And we've already gotten several big time hits from it. And I'm talking about guys like that are going, some of the guys are going high in fantasy right now, like Drake London, 24th overall in Yahoo ADP. But Garrett Wilson has been incredibly unlucky so far throughout his career. Jameson Williams finally hit last year. Also, and some of that is self-inflicted bad luck. George Pickens, from a situational perspective, some bad luck there. Also, maybe you could argue some self-inflicted bad luck. And certainly Chris Olave, who's the 90th overall pick in fantasy right now, I think talent-wise is on par with these guys. But whether it's just the Saints of it all, obviously his concussion issues, just some, in my opinion, bad touchdown luck. He's not been like a big time weekly producer in fantasy football just yet. So I think the question with that cohort of players, Rich, is does the luck change for any of these guys this season to maybe vault one of these guys like Wilson or Pickens or Olave or Williams as well into kind of jumping some of the higher ranked players this year?
It could. Let's talk about some of these guys. I mean, Garrett Wilson has gotten steamed this offseason, kind of surprisingly to me. Usually in fantasy football, when you have kind of like this consistent, poor run out, or you don't hit your ADP, or you're not necessarily, delivering like these spike seasons, gamers will start to just kind of put that in and say that's who you are, right? Yeah. And Garrett Wilson has climbed like back up into like the fringe wide receiver 1 conversation in terms of ADP. And it's not just because people are drafting wide receivers like heavy, like in context of wide receivers, he's being drafted again, like wide receiver 12 to 14 again. Like, here he is. And from a talent perspective, he's easy to bet on, like, right? Like we're going off of what we believe the player he is, but he once again is in another spot where we have to take a leap of faith on his surrounding system. Like, not only has he caught passes basically from every terrible quarterback in the NFL and then the ghost of Aaron Rodgers, but he's been also saddled with like donkey coordinators, like the schemes he's been in. And there is some excitement from like a Tanner Angstrom, but we don't really know what Tanner Angstrom is. But it's the attachment to Justin Fields now that we have to question. And I know people will always bring up like the small overlap they had at Ohio State. Like, people act like these dudes were like, there's like this huge sample size of targets of Justin Fields. I think
Wilson had like 700 yards with Justin Fields as the start of that one year. So
yeah, he was a sophomore. And he obviously was effective on a per target basis in that offense. But we haven't seen like Justin Fields, the Ohio State version, like be that in the NFL. Like, all the issues he had at Ohio State have been exposed exposed in the quick game. The reason why I'm a little bit, worried about this, and you can say like, oh, well, Tanner Angstrom, maybe he brings over some of that versatility, because we haven't seen Garrett Wilson do like really anything creative in the NFL yet, like move around the formation, do any of that stuff. But it's the Justin Fields attachment, because what Ben Johnson was really successful with in Detroit was the under center passing game. And you have to be able to run the football to do that. And you have to have a quarterback that can operate with his back to the defense and process with his back to the defense like Jared Goff could. And like, we just don't have an example of that with Justin Fields. I mean, since he entered the NFL, I mean, he's 35th in EPA per dropback in snaps under center. Like, it's just not his game. And when you have to go back and play out of shotgun, it's significantly like is a decline in efficiency in the NFL. I mean, even last year, NFL teams averaged a full yard per pass, especially in context of the way defenses are playing now. You more than ever need to pass from under center. You need to have that, I like to call it offensive leverage, where the defense believes like they have to challenge the run and the pass, right? Because when the defense can just drop back and play coverage, that's what the NFL is built around now. Now you have to throw your 3-yard hitch and your dump off pass, and we're going to come up and tackle. So does Justin Fields have the capability to transition the offense like that? And I think that's a big question mark still with, Garrett Wilson. And when you talk about the fantasy context, like when you look at like his Vegas lines, and Vegas lines aren't the be all end all. I'm not saying you should draft off them, but when you look at like the players around him in ADP, and you look at like his over unders, like his touchdown prop is 4.5 right now. And then you look at like the guys he's going around, and they're all like 7.5, and you're just like, man, are we paying sticker price again? And then the other thing people will always go back to with Garrett Wilson this year is the DJ Moore year from 2 years ago, right? Like the spike season. But we were getting DJ Moore as a back end wide receiver too that year. Now have we priced ourselves out of Garrett Wilson again? Is where I'm at.
It's a good question. I mean, yeah, like on Yahoo right now, and obviously it's not like all the drafts are happening right now. He's got a 41st overall, wide receiver 16-ish ADP, which like I think I'd be comfortable with that. But yeah, I do look around at like some other sites, and he's going a little closer to like wide receiver 12, and that does feel aggressive. And it's tough, Rich, because from a talent perspective, I think Garrett Wilson is as good as some of those guys that I had in the top 10 real life rankings. Like, he's such a good separator, and I really do believe that like, if Tanner Angstrom brings in like, I don't know, 60% of some of the stuff that they were doing in Detroit in terms of like condensed formations, moving receivers around, just not having the receivers run, Garrett Wilson last year in reception perception ran a slant on 26.4% of his charted routes and a 9 route on 21.5%. Like, that is as archaic a route tree as you're going to get. And that's very Rodgers-esque. And like Jameson Williams, for example, ran a go route, even though he's, a fast player, that was like 14%, 13%. So like just maximizing him as a separator on different routes. Like, I think structurally the change is going to be good for him, but it is just a Justin Fields question. And like, how instructive do you think that DJ Moore season is when we're mapping that like DJ Moore, Justin Fields season onto a guy like Garrett Wilson?
We need Emmanuel Forbes to come and guard Garrett Wilson for the games, like the DJ Moore game.
It's a great point. That is a great point. Like, how, again, it's when we're talking about like Jerry Jeudy this offseason, I know this is always stupid, but it's just like, okay, you take away that Broncos game, like how much does the rest of it look all that good? And that was kind of the same case for that Commanders Thursday night game with DJ Moore in the Chicago Bears that year.
Yeah, I just genuinely worry about like the Justin Fields equation of it all, and the upside of what we're buying. The player, I think from a dynasty perspective, like, you're still just excited and to keep betting on talent like you should.
Sure.
But I do think that the price, especially when you just look at it's not just the receivers Garrett Wilson's going around. It's like when you look in your drafts, and it's like some of the running back just still hold so much upside, versus him. Like, you still have to take Garrett Wilson. I know Kyron Williams is like a polarizing player, but like, you still have to take him over like Kyron Williams, like a guy who could score 15 touchdowns, right? Or like a Breece Hall. And it's just like, it's a tougher click when you get into that area.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I think we're in agreement that like, if everything came together for Garrett Wilson, he could be one of those guys. but we're looking at multiple ifs for the fourth season of his NFL career here. Let's talk about some of these other guys like Williams, Pickens, Olave. I think you and I spoke about Pickens like right after that trade happened. And I'll tell you this, man, like I've only gotten more excited about his potential fantasy fit in Dallas, especially just with the way he played last year. He's obviously a volatile guy himself. And like, I would not say from a talent perspective that he's up there with a guy like Garrett Wilson or, you know, some of the other guys in the top 10, but shoot, from a scoring standpoint, just like how fantasy points are accumulated, I think he's going to get a lot of those opportunities this year.
Yeah, I think that this is just where we talk about like price point, opportunity, like player trajectory. Like this is probably the most exciting player that from this group that we're talking about, because even at face value, if George Pickens doesn't change his stripes, if he's just a player he was in Pittsburgh, in Dallas, this is an upgrade on that role and player, right? Like since he entered the NFL, 28.3% of his career targets are 20 or more yards downfield. No player with as many targets as him has a higher rate. And then since entering the NFL, Dak Prescott is 4th in quarterback rating on those throws. He's 8th in accuracy on those throws. So he can still just be in a better environment and attach a better quarterback play, being the same player he is, and get an upgrade. Then we have kind of the unknown factor. What if in Dallas he is able to get access to maybe some types of targets that can turn him into like the season that we saw from T. Higgins last year? So when Tyler Boyd left Cincinnati, not enough people priced in like his absence and what it would change for the route tree that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins got. I mean, if you go back to T. Higgins last year, this dude was just running like 4 to 6 yard outs and like hitches and just killing people with his body, right? Like, because he's just a huge dude. What, can we not do that with George Pickens? Like, I know that he doesn't need nuance. Like, we don't need George Pickens to get in the bag, right? Like, he doesn't need to be running like, 15-yard dig routes. He's big enough to where he can run off a defender and turn the hell around, and you give him the football like T. Higgins did last year. So does he have that opportunity with CeeDee Lamb kind of soaking up a lot of attention? CeeDee Lamb moves it inside, and then you have the contingency value. If anything were to happen to CeeDee Lamb, which none of us want to happen, George Pickens now becomes the wide receiver one in the Dallas Cowboy offense. Like, that contingency upside isn't priced in either. So like, from a range of outcome stance, I think that you're getting at face value an upgrade, a potential upgrade if he's just gets access to different things he hasn't done, and then if the contingency scenario plays out. So I think at ADP is one of my favorite picks.
Same here, man. Like, and I think he'd have to climb well above like his current ADP for me to be like, I think we're now getting, maybe higher than the potential ceiling, because like you bring up that T. Higgins example, which this is the exact opposite of what I wanted to happen here, Rich, because you and I are like actually in lockstep on this one, because I've brought up this T. Higgins comparison several times, and especially just, again, I brought this up with James Coe the other day. From a reception perception standpoint, their 2024 seasons are like identical from a success rate versus man, zone, press coverage. Like, Higgins was 72.4% against man coverage last year. George Pickens is at 72.8%. And like, again, I think that Higgins was a top 5 per game scorer last year, of course, because he missed time. And I'm not saying that Pickens is going to be a top 5, per game scorer, but like, that ceiling case is very, very realistic for him. So even though, again, it's funny, like the premise of this is like, from a talent perspective, are we rather flat throughout the league? I think that Pickens fits maybe towards that lower end of the like talent bar or whatever. But I think by the end of the season, we could look at him as one of the best number 2 receivers in the NFL, and shoot, from a fantasy perspective, maybe like the most productive number 2 receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, we also saw something similar happen with Cortland Sutton last year in the Sean Payton offense, transitioning to Bo Nix, where it was more of a get the ball out of Bo Nix's hands, quick passing game. Like, you got Bo Nix's splits, like when he got rid of the football under 2.5 seconds and over, it's night and day. It's like a completely different quarterback. But Cortland Sutton became like a high floor player the back half of last year, and he was never considered that, right? Like, he was always considered like the big Mike Williams archetype. Like, if Cortland Sutton doesn't catch a touchdown or a 30-yard, moon ball, like, he's not giving you anything. And then he became kind of like a possession receiver. And like, you can use these big bodies like that. So like, I do think that like George Pickens still has something that hasn't quite been tapped into, that I don't want to discount and just say like, all right, well, this is who he's going to be the rest of his career too. Then you also have the narrative street, like he bet on himself too, right? Like, which we can't really quantify, but like, seems like there's a little motivation to earn the bag for George Pickens.
I mean, as there should be. Yeah, this is money making time. And I think especially in years prior, I might have been more like, nah, he kind of is who he is. But I really do think he took a step individually, for large chunks of the season last year. And if we get that over a full consistent game, like full season, because he's dialed in, because it's money making time, then we're talking about something, where he has really, really made the leap there. What do we do with a guy like Chris Olave before we move on from this kind of cursed 2022 class? Because Rich, again, Yahoo ADP right now, he's 90th overall. That's so late, but is this just is it kind of catching the falling knife sort of thing with Chris Olave that oh yeah, I caught the knife and it cut my hand. What did I expect to happen here? I drafted Chris Olave and he, obviously we can't quantify this, but he missed time again with concussions, or the Saints offense was still bad. From a talent perspective, he just is much better than a lot of the guys he's ranked around. But are the environmental factors and sort of the things we can't control, are those enough to get you to be like, you know what, I'm just going to stay away this year?
No, I think it's league dependent, team build dependent, but I think there's a lot of pros. I actually think Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson should be closer in price point than they actually are, because we laid out kind of the concerns we have about the situation Garrett Wilson has, but all that's priced in with the Chris Olave right now. And the concussion stuff is one of those things, it's just one of those things that's hard to quantify. We did this with Devontae Adams early in his career, and it never became an issue again, right? So it's hard for me to say, hey, what's going to happen to Chris Olave? Might avoid him strictly because of the concussion stuff. Again, I would say that that's probably priced in, here a little bit as well. But you look at his one game without Derek Carr last year, he still was really good, within that Spencer Rattler game. It was the Charger game. He was a really good player. He can earn targets. And now he's getting an offensive coordinator. And I think Clint Kubiak brings something, a different set of positives than Kellen Moore brings. But we are going to see that versatility from Chris Olave that we haven't seen to start his career. I mean, New Orleans played a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, a lot of tight splits under Clint Kubiak. And because of that, he played a career low 21% of his snaps in the slot last season after 38% in 2023, 32.5% as a rookie. And to this point in his career, I mean, Chris Olave from the slot, 2.2 yards per out run from the slot. He's earned a target from the slot on 28% of his routes. And what has Kellen Moore consistently done with his lead wide receiver? Now, he had kind of the 1A, 1B thing last year, but we saw Devontae Smith get a career spike in terms of slot usage last year. We're going to see that happen to Chris Olave. Rashid Shaheed's not going to be the dude that he moves into the slot and is giving him access to these kind of easier first read targets. And when you have a guy like Tyler Shuck, who's kind of an unknown, but is a pocket passer, what's going to be built into this offense? Probably a lot of first read plays to Chris Olave, right? So if you're in a full PPR
and a guy who historically wants to get the ball out very fast in Tyler Shuck, because he doesn't really want to.
Oh yeah, and if you breathe on Tyler Shuck, he's just throwing it out of bounds.
Exactly.
One of the weirdest college dynamics. I never seen a quarterback throw he's I'm throwing it away, whatever. Yeah. And then he'll make some of the weird plays too, where when he tries to play hero ball, and you're just what are you doing, man? But
don't do that again.
Yeah, don't ever let us see that. There's some plays on his tape where I'm like, how could you even possibly consider this guy at 40th overall? But desperate times in the Bayou. But yeah, I mean, I think in a full PPR league, to be able to draft him around complete wide receiver 3 pricing, and remember, wide receiver 3 pricing doesn't mean he's your team wide receiver 3. If you're in a full PPR format, you can get Chris Olave as your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, and I think you're getting a lot of target insulation and a lot of floor potential. Now, in non-PPR formats, I still think we have to question from the team environment the touchdown upside. The odds that he becomes an 8+ touchdown guy this year, I think that's a thin argument to make. That's why I think only full PPR, and we're able to get him when you're able to get him as these wide receiver 4 spots like this on your roster. But I do think that there is an upside case to be made from him actually being underpriced, though.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you kind of framed this as, it is about the players and the 80. It's more about the ADPs and the price than it is about the player here, because I think when you talk about Chris Olave, and I have talked about him this offseason, and some of the first responses you get is nope, not doing that again. And for me personally, the way I view players and the way I analyze the game and the way I play fantasy is I don't really have I'm not doing that again. Nope. Especially, this is not the way I do it, not the way I view things. I don't think you should ever have a never again player, especially when, unlike Garrett Wilson, you like last year, Chris Olave was going as like the wide receiver 12, and now he's not even going as inside like the top 30 receivers. So we're not actually asking you to do it again. This is like a completely different exercise because, it's like, okay, you draft him as the wide receiver 31, 35, somewhere in between there, depending on where you're drafting and like what outlet you're drafting at. Oh, it doesn't work out. Who cares? Like you said, he could be your wide receiver 4 in a PPR format. So I am like just gritting my teeth and doing it again with Chris Olave in that sense, but it is a much bigger discount than certainly what you were doing it at last year. I want to move on to premise number 2 here, unless you
I did want to touch. Did you want to talk to Jameson Williams just briefly?
Yeah, go for it. We just had a whole big Lions episode, so you give me your thoughts on Jameson Williams though.
Yeah, I mean he's another guy. I think when we're talking about like price point, is just very tough to factor in what the changes are in Detroit and like be willing to pay like that kind of spike, because we have the Detroit Lions coming off of this historic season. They scored 18 touchdowns over expectation last year. We had Jared Goff have a career year. We know there's anytime you have like a pocket passer in a career, you know there's going to be some like regression that we need to price in with that. And then you have, obviously the Frank Ragnow retirement, Zietler, leaving in free agency, and the change from Ben Johnson, right? Like what do we see stick in this offense under, John Morton? Because it's not that Jameson Williams was winning vertically with the speed. It's Ben Johnson was creating like space with him on mesh and he was getting him running across the formation where a DB had to chase him for 30 yards horizontally, and like nobody could do that. And he's getting like these plays where he's catching like this 8-yard pass and turning into like a 25-yard gain, a 40-yard gain. Some of these he took for house calls. I believe there was a Jaguars one early in the middle of the season where he caught just like a 12-yard pass and like took it like 60 yards. The 49ers game had a long one. And like, are we going to see like that stuff from him in this offense? And like when you factor in everything, I think the leap of faith you still have to take for a player that didn't even give you like a lot of spike weeks for the player he was. Like we were talking about like 25 plus PPR point games, like you just didn't get those. So when you're talking about like George Pickens is a great example. Like I can tell myself a story where George Pickens has 30 more targets than Jameson Williams and has the highest scoring games between the two, maybe is the top 5 highest scoring games between the two, and he goes after him. So yeah, I think there's a lot of questions with Jameson Williams in this transition, although the growth was there from him. But I think a lot of it we put a lot of faith in Ben Johnson, and then we're, giving these Bears guys the benefit of the doubt because of the, Ben Johnson going over there.
Yeah, it doesn't really, like, the math is not mathing in that regard. Let's move to premise number 2. And this one, I don't have like a group of players to talk about, so just kind of want to throw the question to you. Like, are there certain guys, and I'll give you some examples of the guys that I think about, like, are there certain guys that you see, like that maybe we kind of view them as like not special, maybe more like complementary wide receivers that are able to make a production-based leap? And I'm not necessarily talking about like, Devontae Smith or T. Higgins, like number 2, like complementary receivers on their team. I'm talking about guys like Jaden Reed is one of these players, that people like. I think because Dynasty Fantasy Football, Rich, has become so popular and all of us play it, like I think that lens of analysis has really bled into some redraft like thoughts and like year-to-year thoughts. And weirdly, I think because Dynasty is so popular, a lot of the people that play it have gotten a little bit more like, yeah, this guy is who he is, and like I'm just moving on to the next rookie class, and like the imagination for players is not necessarily there anymore like it maybe was 10 years ago. That's just one of my like pet theories, like of viewing how people talk about players. But like a guy like Jaden Reed, I think, is an example of this. Zay Flowers, maybe an example of this. Josh Downs. Ironically, a lot of the guys from like the 2023 class are sort of viewed as these like, well, yeah, they're maybe not difference makers. They're just like solid players. Are there guys? It doesn't have to be those 3 necessarily. Those are just 3 that came to my mind. But are there players that you see like are viewed in that way that maybe actually could make sort of a production-based leap this season?
Yeah, and we talked about Courtland Sutton. I think like he would have fit this archetype last year, right? Like everyone was just like, this is who Courtland Sutton is. And then we saw the transition.
Maybe another example of that. And obviously, big change. Both those guys obviously got new quarterbacks this past offseason.
Yeah. Just someone please tell Cliff Kingsbury that Terry McLaurin doesn't have to line up at left wide receiver every single snap.
Good luck with that.
I mean, the first guy that stands out to me, and I do think that this is probably not a 2025 take, but maybe some dominoes fall and we can get this opening. But no player stands out to me more than Josh Downs, right? Like, I think if there's any player that has, I don't want to say there ever will be another Antonio Brown, but if any player that is currently playing, I think has that in his range of outcomes, it's Josh Downs. Because you remember, like, early career Antonio Brown was like a punt returner, a slot receiver, but he was like he was hyper efficient. He wasn't getting the opportunities. And then when he got a chance to be like a full field wide receiver, he just went absolutely nuclear. I do think Josh Downs has that in his range of outcomes. I do think he probably is roadblocked based on the log jam and the quarterback situation this year, because he's probably still stuck playing as a slot dependent player with Alec Pierce still there, and maybe even Adonai Mitchell when Alec Pierce leaves, but again, they could get out of Michael Pittman's contract after year. I think there's a lot of fluidity from a dynasty stance where Josh Downs could still play in 1 to 2 wide receiver sets, but that's been his one bugaboo. And you brought up Jaden Reed too. We know these guys are hyper efficient players and we want to bet on talent. It's the situations that they're in that is roadblocking them. I mean, through 2 years in the NFL, Jaden Reed has run 7 pass routes and 1 to 2 wide receiver sets. 7.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
7. That's 2. And when you say, well, how many 1 to 2 wide receiver sets are the Packers running? It's 2.6% of the plays. Like, absolutely bonkers. And that's been the rub with Josh Downs a little bit to start his career. 16 routes through 2 years and 1 to 2 wide receiver sets, plus they had Tyler Warren. But when you look at just his efficiency per play, is just like, it's just something you want to bet on. I mean, he was targeted on 29.4% of his routes. Only Puka Nacua and Malik Neighbors were higher than him, 2.2 yards per out run. That was top 20. When Josh Downs was on the football field last year, he had 36% of his team's targets. That was 5th in the NFL, like when he was just on the field, because the dude gets open. Like I said, the slot stuff I think is probably still a potential roadblock for 2025, and the quarterback stuff is still an issue. Maybe we get the Daniel Jones Wandale run out, right? Maybe he's Daniel Jones's Wandale and he's a better player.
I hate that like that's what we have to hope for Josh Downs, because just it's so gross. But yes, it is true.
But I still think, I know it's putting lofty, like I'm saying this is the 1% outcome, the apex outcomes. I do think like this dude could be like on the Antonio Brown spectrum.
It's crazy, like looking back at Antonio Brown from a reception perception standpoint. You talked about, early in his career, he was moving around the formation a little bit. He was like a punt returner, slot receiver. And we talked about up at the top, like, nobody uses their best wide receiver just at X receiver all the time. But like, I've got 3 seasons from AB, 2014, 2016, 2017 charted. All 3 of those seasons, he was an 80% outside. One season, 91.4% snaps outside in 2017. And all 3 of them over 80% on the line of scrimmage. Like, I don't know if that's ever in the cards for Josh Downs, but I mean, nobody would have said that was in the cards for Antonio Brown. So yeah, he does need to, if the Colts are going to remain like, they're going to run a lot more like 2 receiver sets. Like, he does need to push out Alec Pierce, or probably won't do it to Michael Pittman, because like Pittman's is like a consistent player and like a beloved guy of the team. I think that's probably unlikely, but I will say that I think the drafting of Tyler Warren,
guy being left for dead.
Pittman, 100%. Like he could fit into this conversation as well. Like, as much as, and like every time I've talked about Josh Downs, I've talked about Josh Downs a lot this offseason, because have been a big fan of his dating back to UNC. I'm like, let's not forget that Michael Pittman's like good. He's not just some guy that like, we got to just throw this guy away. Like he's a pretty good, consistent football player as well. There's a chance he could be the guy that, like, if Josh Downs misses time, like he ends up being a big time value this year if they go back to that kind of Gardner Minshew world. But I think drafting Tyler Warren does signal that they want to just play a lot more 11 personnel and just leave one tight end on the field. But I could be wrong about that, and maybe that's just a misguess. So we'll see. Are there other players that maybe, other than Josh Downs, like it could be veteran players? It could
I think there's one maybe smacking us in the face, right? Like,
go for it, because
we seen it last year. It's Juauan Jennings, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and listen, I know we'll probably transition and talk about Pearsall too. That's the that's why Jennings is being priced where he is right now. It's because the unknown kind of dominoes falling in this 49er offense. Like, where does the hierarchy fall, especially when Brandon Ayuk eventually comes back, if he does ever? And who knows? There's a lot of ominous stuff going on with him every week, in the organization. But Juauan Jennings like showed that anytime he was put in a position, no matter what position he was put in, like he just delivered. And like, what if we just get that again? What if the answer all along was just, hey, what he showed us last year is what he could be, and you're able to get him at, wide receiver 36 because everyone is kind of not knowing what's going to happen with this 49ers offense or how these guys are going to stack up. Me and you and I talked about this, like, one, how much 11 personnel the 49ers end up playing? Do they end up playing more? There was some signal, I think, early in the offseason that they might hint at it. Remember, the first thing that the 49ers did this offseason was release Kyle Juszczyk, and some of that was salary, but also there was no guarantee they were going to get Kyle Juszczyk back. And then, some things fall, like he takes a salary cut, comes back to the 49ers, and you're just like, damn it, all right, well, they are going to use the fullback again to some degree. But what if they're with the Deebo Samuel leaving and, maybe a reduction on those fullback snaps? Like, do they play more 11 personnel? Like, there's just a lot of questions with this 49ers passing game where I think a lot of people are pricing in a lot of previous versions of the 49ers passing game, and it could look a lot different. And just what if Juauan Jennings is good? Like, anytime he's gotten an opportunity, going back to college, I actually really liked him as a prospect and was kind of bummed at like where he went in terms of the draft, because I thought he was a better player than that. And then in the NFL, he's just one of these guys, like, anytime he gets a shot, he delivers. Like, what if he just is the dude? What if he is the 49ers wide receiver one?
Yeah, and because I think whether they are an 11 personnel, like, heavier team, or they do play more, 2 receiver sets, stuff like that, it's tough for me to imagine him leaving the field because, like, especially when Ayuk is not available, and we just don't know, like, when he's going to be available, because, like, Jennings took pretty well to playing X receiver for them last year, but we also know that he's got a lot of history as, like, just a good role playing kind of power slot guy. He's such a good blocker because this offense wants to play more condensed. Like, they need their receivers to block their ass off. That's why Ayuk got himself out of the doghouse. That's why Jennings has hung around for this long. So as much as, we'll talk about Pearsall in the next segment. Like, and I do like taking the bet on Pearsall. I wish he was obviously, as long as he's healthy in training camp, I'm going to end up drafting a lot of him. But that doesn't mean that you also have to ignore a guy like a Juauan Jennings there. So he's certainly still within the consideration there. I'll throw one at you. What about a guy like Calvin Ridley in Tennessee? Like, Ridley, I think, fits into this bucket as a guy that we all just, he's not a special player. You solid, like, receiver, whatever. He's kind of run into some bad quarterback luck. He's also run into some, like, weird deployment luck, weird offenses over the last couple of seasons in Jacksonville and Tennessee. But if Cam Ward can give us, like, an impression of what Jaden Daniels did last year, not obviously to that degree, the Titans are not going to the AFC Championship or something like that, but if he can come in and be, like, a good passer as a rookie, could Ridley have, like, a 2024 Terry McLaurin type of season? Not in the way he scores fantasy points as, like, a pure vertical guy, but just be the clear number one of a passing offense that might be well above expectations this year.
Yeah, and you bring up the deployment stuff with him, and that's what we need to change more than the Cam Ward stuff, because it's easy to just look at, like, Terry McLaurin last year, Cortland Sutton last year, Nico Collins the year before that, and say, hey, we know the upside potential with the rookie quarterback, or just getting, not having terrible quarterback play and that transition, what it can do for a player. But yeah, we need Brian Callahan to use Calvin Ridley in a different, capacity than he did last year. I mean, it's almost 16 air yards per target. Like, we talked about this with Marvin Harrison when you came on my show. It's like the free square stuff is relevant in today's NFL and the way you're playing offense. And we'd love to see them get a little more creative with Calvin Ridley. 27% of his targets, 20 or more yards downfield. The only wide receivers had a higher rate with 100 plus targets were DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Jordan Addison, like guys that were largely role players in their offense last year. The obviously Will Levis stuff is going to be removed. We kind of hit on that. But then, like, when you don't get the free squares, right? What it does is it creates, like, this huge significant gap in terms of the way you're used based on how NFL teams are playing coverage, right? And that's what happened to Calvin Ridley last year. He was targeted on 32% of his routes against man coverage. That was 9th amongst all wide receivers. He's still winning one-on-one. Like, when you look at 3 yards per route run against man coverage, that was wide receiver 5 on the season. He's still winning one-on-one, but then against zone coverage, 18.6% target rate per route run drops to wide receiver 45. He's not doing any of that free square stuff. And that's what we need to see incorporated. But I do like the potential of him at cost, even if he's the same player that he was. I think Cam Ward facilitates that deep ball a lot better than Will Levis did. But we do need Brian Callahan to kind of wake up. And we see this stuff all the time, right? where you tell yourself like, hey, we know this. Why don't the NFL coaches know this? We talk Marvin Harrison, right? Like we have to bake that in though to like an assumption. And like sometimes it doesn't always happen.
All right, that was great. Those are exactly the type of players I kind of wanted to hit in that segment. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back with premise number 3 on the 2024 rookie wide receivers right after this. All right, we are back. My third premise for this whole idea here, if we're wrong about our wide receiver rankings is, I think this is maybe the most pressing question of the moment, Rich, and really the one I want to get your take on. Are we all maybe a little too overconfident in our consensus rankings of the 2024 rookie wide receivers? And just looking at ADP right now, this is just from Yahoo, but I think this is pretty consistent throughout the industry. Like, it basically goes Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. are both like 14th, 16th overall. By the way, like I'm in on these guys where they're going here. Like, I'm not saying to not take these players. And then Ladd McConkey, 24th overall. You guys know I'm definitely in on where he is going. Then it's like kind of Marvin Harrison Jr. in no man's land here at like 43rd overall. Interesting to consider whether he's, maybe worth taking that post-hype sort of rebound season there. But then you've got like Xavier Worthy, 71st, Rome Odunze, 94th overall, Ricky Pearsall, 119th, like Keon Coleman, deep into the drafts. And I actually think if he gets a change in deployment, he's worth talking about maybe as somebody that actually could be a breakout, even if I have concerns about how his year one play at the X receiver position. So this was generally, again, heralded as a really deep, really talented wide receiver class, but it does feel like the fantasy community is very much like, yep, these are the top 3 guys, and these will be the top 3 guys kind of forever in Neighbors, Thomas, and McConkey. I think all 3 of those guys were awesome as rookies. And again, I'm not even like, fade Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey at all. I'm just wondering if some of these other guys could maybe close the gap coming into this year.
It's an interesting group for sure. You and I did a 20-minute segment on Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd love everyone to go kind of, check that out so we don't have to just rehash the same
exactly.
conversation
Just go watch that's on YouTube on your tell the people your podcast, like, so just so we don't have to do that again. So we already did that. Save some time.
Yep. Over at Sharp Football, you just YouTube us. We had an in-depth conversation about deployment, the quarterback stuff, the coordinator stuff, all the stuff. If you want to go to Marvin Harrison talk, we'll go there.
Frankly, I'd like to not do it for the 15th time in the last 12 months as well. So let's just do it. Let's just do that.
To me, I mean, the first guy that stands out is like me kind of not being in on it all at cost, because I can talk myself into at least taking a blind bet on Marvin Harrison Jr. at ADP based on the touchdown stuff and the year 2 wide receiver stuff and just saying whatever, throw caution to the wind. But like the guy that stands out to me the most of like, I don't think the fantasy community knows what to do with, and that like I still definitely am not taking him where he goes, is Xavier Worthy. I mean, Xavier Worthy didn't even have 80 receiving yards in a game in the regular season last year. And like he's drafted as like a firm wide receiver too. And we got Rashee Rice coming back, and he wasn't in the Rashee Rice role. Like he wasn't used exactly like Rashee Rice was, as like give him the football, let him create with Yak. But he was getting a lot of, like we bring up the free square stuff. He was getting a lot of slot usage, a lot of stuff near the line of scrimmage. And that gave him like a little bit of a floor and was useful with the touchdowns, the back half of the year, and made him kind of like this wide receiver 3+ guy. But now we have Rashee Rice coming back. We have, obviously they bring Hollywood back on the 1-year contract. It's just a lot of unknowns, I think, for a player that really didn't showcase a lot of like individual upside outside of the back half of the Super Bowl when all hell was broken loose. How many Chiefs games will we see that forever over like the course of Mahomes' career? Like very rare. Like that's a very minute outcome where the Chiefs are just absolutely chasing, 3+ touchdowns. Like we're just not going to get a lot of those games. If that's what you're banking on for a
split
game.
like 2 backup safeties to get that second deep touchdown. Like that's just not it. Incredible.
It's a bummer.
I wish those throws had hit during the regular season, right? Like we'd be having a whole different conversation.
Yeah, he did have a lot of like just missed plays that I think you can go back to, because I do think he's going to be the field stretcher when these, because they're going to play a lot more 11 personnel this year. That I believe they wanted to play more 11 personnel last year. They just never had the opportunity because Hollywood started hurt. Then Rashee Rice goes down in week 4, and then they're like, oh, what do we go? They were back to square one of like, there was never any intent. If you watch the first month of the offense of the Chiefs, there was never any intent of running that offense through a 35-year-old Travis Kelce. It was just, it defaulted back on it like during the course of the season because of everything that happened. That's not going to be the case this year. At least we hope it doesn't be the case because, all three of these guys are, look like they're on track to be healthy. I think they're going to play a lot more 11 personnel. And I think when all three of these guys are on the field together, it still sets up to be Xavier Worthy being the guy that kind of clears space for Rashee Rice. And, probably in Travis Kelce's not going to be he's not going to have no targets. So I still think Xavier Worthy is going to be a very catawampus like producer. Like he's going to need those shot plays to hit and not, run in the worst outcome that he had last year, like where he's stepping out of bounds with one play and like goofy stuff like that. But at his cost, I mean, like, how can you confidently take him over like these other players? Like, I can't do it, man. Like I can't do it.
It's a really good point. And like, no matter what, I think Xavier Worthy is a good player, period, point blank. Like he's a good player. He's also very tactically valuable to the Chiefs offense. That was like right away apparent when, like, listen, Rashee Rice is not catching 10 slant routes in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens if they are not afraid of Xavier Worthy as that vertical speed threat. Like that's why those two guys like unlock something about each other. But like, let me put it to you this way, because I've struggled with this question. Like, number one, are you in on Rashee Rice where his ADP is starting to climb? And 2, can you be in on Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy both as fantasy draft picks where they're going right now?
I mean, if you are, you better be in on Patrick Mahomes, like at his cost, because the cheapest Patrick Mahomes has been. Like, that's the way to play it. I think if you're in on both players and you don't really like the cost of either player, then like Mahomes is probably your default like QB6, right? Like he's kind of the firewall guy. Because after Mahomes is where you start to get into that like real big pocket where it's like, I've said to a bunch of people like Matt, like you could look at my quarterback rankings, you can be like, Rich, like you have that guy QB 18, I have him QB 8, and I would look you dead in the face and be like, yeah, okay. Like,
sure.
It's just like when you get to that pocket of quarterbacks, like after Mahomes, like it's kind of the Wild West. Like it's just all these guys you can make either a bull case for or kind of tear down, like the QB2 streamer types. But like Mahomes is kind of that firewall. Like after him is where just kind of it goes crazy. So you better be in Mahomes if that's the case. I do believe kind of like what you hinted at though. I just think that what Worthy does is make Rashee Rice better. And that part of the offense has been such a staple of the Chiefs, even, going back to Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill was winning downfield, but he was getting a lot of that stuff too. So I just think that that's the way the offense wants to operate. Also, Mahomes, interesting enough, like he hasn't been good throwing down the field. Some of the plays that we talked about Xavier Worthy were on Mahomes. Like,
100%.
So like when you look at Mahomes' downfield passing the past 2 years, he's been horrendous on he's been at the bottom of the league, like and throws over 10 yards downfield in terms of accuracy. And like, that's not the player that he was early in his career. But like, what if we are always constantly chasing that ghost with Patrick Mahomes, right? And Patrick Mahomes from a talent perspective, like, I mean, I'm not tearing down Patrick Mahomes as a player. He's QB1 in the NFL by a mile. Like, think of like all the issues the Chiefs have had in reality, and that he's still going to the Super Bowl every year. Like, I'm talking about just from like a fantasy like upside stance. What if we're consistently chasing attachment to prime Tyreek Hill and prime Travis Kelce, and we just never have that intersection again, right? Like what?
100%. Yeah, I like that. To me, that just like it can't be true, right? Like it can't be what happens. But if you look at explosive play rate the last 2 seasons, it goes Patriots right from the bottom, obviously. Patriots, Raiders, Giants, Jets, Panthers, Browns, Chiefs. Like that's the category the Kansas City Chiefs are keeping, and yet that's where it's been, and it's felt like that.
Stuff anymore. Like they saw man coverage at like one of the highest rates in the NFL last year. Like teams weren't scared of their receivers. Like, and maybe that changes, like you said, if Worthy is the lid lifter and you get more, but like their like middle of the field open stuff is actually like decreased. They're one of the teams that, because they were kind of the forefront of like why this all started. And now ironically, like they're struggling to beat we're back to square one. Like they're struggling to beat the stuff that we want the offenses to get. And until that happens, I mean, we're going to continue to see those issues. And I do think that it's question mark, because Xavier Worthy, for as fast as a football player he is, he had these issues in Texas, like winning one-on-one downfield. Like he in a straight line, he's faster than everyone. But like route nuance and beating press, like this is something he has not answered as a player yet. He's not answered these things. And if he's in a role where he has to do that still, we still have to take a step of faith. That's why I just look at him and what he does. And I think he brings tactically what he brings to the offense. He makes the other guys better.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, like, Marquise Brown is a very similar player, like where he's fast on a straight line, but he's not like he's definitely a route runner, like a technician. I mean, he's actually a really good technician, but he's just small. Like he doesn't beat press coverage. Like it is what it is. Let's talk about a guy like Rome Odunze. Like, look, everybody knows I'm high on Rome this year, but we're gonna hear my interview with him here coming up later. Really interested to see like how he's deployed him. Yeah, okay. Well, it's on the podcast, Rich. Like you have to promote what's on the podcast. So, second, hey, humble brag, my second interview with him this calendar year. So, my good pal Rome Odunze, basically. But anyway,
that's right.
Yeah, everybody knows I'm in on Rome from a talent perspective, but obviously there's questions about this offense. There's questions about Caleb Williams. Like, what are you doing with him from a draft perspective this year?
He's been, I'm intrigued by him. He's a player like I want to bet on. Like anytime these disappointing like year one wide receivers, I want to kind of come back in and like, so if you look at like over the past, 15 years of wide receiver ADP, nothing has hit more than the year two wide receiver, right? Like when you look at the subset of wide receivers that get selected outside of the top 24, so like players that obviously come with inherent question marks, no subset of wide receiver has delivered more top 36, top 24, and top 12 scoring seasons than year two wide receivers. And we saw it again last year. The 2023 rookie class was not very good as wide receivers, but Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, and even Quentin Johnston all were in this bucket last year where they beat ADP. They were value picks. Like how much weekly stability you got out of those guys, definitely we can come back and question, but they all were better players than the field thought they were going to be at the start of last year. So you got guys like Rome Odunze, Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman. I think those are the top three guys I think that stand out from like a discount stance. Because Worthy's getting drafted in the top 24 still.
Right.
These three are the guys that stand out. And Odunze, it's again, we're just looking for different deployment, different situational usage than we saw last year. I mean, he was in that Calvin Ridley bucket that we talked about. I mean, 14 air yards per target. Calvin Ridley was the only receiver, ironically, that had a higher number than Rome Odunze with as many targets as Odunze. 23% of his targets came on 20 yards or downfield. It's just inherently low success rates, even if you're good and have a good quarterback, right? And especially in this context, the NFL, like we're talking about the defensive meta. 27% of his throws were inaccurate throws. The number one in the NFL for a player with that many targets. Also, when you bring up the Bears last year and like you look at their yards per out run stuff, you also have to remember no team ran more what I call them hollow routes or like empty calorie routes. Rome Odunze ran 144 routes last year where there wasn't even a target on the play. It was 23. It was 23% of his route run. He ran 23% of his routes. There wasn't even a throw, like a target on the play on either a sack, a scramble, a tipped pass, or a throwaway. Like
that's to me, Rich, is like why you like any sort of efficiency metric from the Bears offense last year, like per route. You said like
throw it out.
Completely throw that out because of that, and then like DJ Moore just like pumping up like screen passes just to like keep him engaged. So it's just a lot of like weird stuff going on there.
The hard part is just seeing the vision for what, because Ben Johnson comes in his first draft and they take Colston Loveland at pick 10 and then Luther Burden at pick 39. So we just have like a lot of moving parts, right? And that's kind of where we are with Rome Odunze and just trying to figure out what kind of role he's going to play. I do believe when you look at the Bears wide receivers, though, like he's going to be in on two wide receiver sets no matter what they choose to deploy. And that's a big advantage. We just talked about the inverse of Josh Downs and Jaden Reed, right? So he's going to be on the field full-time as a receiver, which I think you like to bet on. Hopefully we get some of that stuff with Jameson Williams where we get some of that horizontal stuff where he's creating space. Yeah. Again, we're taking a leap of faith based on a coordinator with a small sample, but, you might have a favorite musician or like a favorite movie director and like you're going to always continue to buy product from them until they start to let you down, right? And that's kind of where we are with Ben Johnson. Like until he fails us, like we're going to go to the movies and see Ben Johnson. Like we're going to see a Ben Johnson movie. So we're going to find out what happens. So I have no problem betting on him. Keon Coleman, I think, is probably the most interesting of the guys. that you kind of hit on. Well, I'll let you piggyback and throw it on Rome because I'm starting to yammer.
No. I mean, listen, people know how I feel about Rome. Like, I'm much more interested to hear what you have to say on that. But yeah, I agree with you that, like, as the best X receiver candidate on this roster, I think he will be on the field the most, which is, to me, like, yeah, the drafting of Luther Burden and Colson Loveland, I don't think that says very much about Rome Odunze's role. So yeah, I agree. That's a pretty critical point. But I want you to go on Keon Coleman because I was on a Bills podcast last night, and to me, like, I'm interested to see that if Josh Palmer being signed there, because to me, like, when they signed Palmer, I thought he was kind of like going to be a souped up version of Matt Collins for them, because he kind of wins on these like deeper in breaking routes. He's not that good of a separator, or he's not that good of a route runner, but he's got like build up speed, and because of that, he can like explode out of breaks on posts and digs, which kind of were some of the big plays that Matt Collins made for them last year. And I just think Palmer should be a souped up version of that. Dirty work guy, good blocker, but like, as a bigger-ish receiver, what if he takes some X receiver reps and actually allows them to move Keon Coleman around the formation more?
That's what we'd love to see. I mean, obviously the problem is if when they go to, 11 personnel, like, they have a pure slot player that can't get himself out of those situations. That's the one. But
I think the issue is less like slot outside for Keon, and just, can we get him off the line of scrimmage more, and not just pure tethered to the boundary. Like, I could look it up like here now, but just like if they run some like condensed formation stuff where Khalil Shakir is tight to the line and he's the slot receiver, but he's on the line of scrimmage, the Bills are not like, they're kind of in the middle of the league in terms of formation width. They're not like super one way or the other, but when they do run some of those more condensed splits, like, Coleman could be an outside receiver, but he's off the line of scrimmage, and he's he's just like less tight to the boundary, Quentin Johnston-esque.
Yeah, and there's a reason why the Bills went and got Josh Palmer in free agency. Obviously, if their analytics team is looking at things like, schmoes like I'm looking at, like, no team faced man coverage at a higher rate last year than the Buffalo Bills. And, it's because, Joe Brady, they have a good run game. They have a quarterback you got to account for in the run game. So you have to put a lot of assets into slowing that aspect of the team down. But they just didn't have a lot of man beaters last year. They tried to get Amari Cooper to fill that role and just didn't have anything left, and couldn't catch the ball, which is also a problem. But Josh Palmer was one of the better separators and one of the better players at creating separation against man coverage. Keon Coleman wasn't a good separator against man coverage, but had good man coverage splits because he is kind of like Big Mike Williams. Like,
ball winner. Yeah.
They can just win. Yeah. He's a ball. Yeah, it's a my ball mentality. Ironically, the only player that ran more go routes last year in terms of percent of routes than Keon Coleman last year was Mike Williams. Yeah. So maybe,
I mean, if he hits like as an X receiver, that's the peak of what you're hoping for. Maybe more likely like a Devontae Parker type at some point as well.
Yes. But when Josh Allen saw rookie Keon Coleman in man coverage, he gave him opportunities to win. He was targeted on 28% of his routes against man coverage, against zone 13.4%. Like, I mean, that's double, guys. That's, more than double.
Yeah.
And he did have a good yards per out run against man coverage. Like I said, it's not that it's like he's creating separation. He's just winning a lot of those 50-50 balls. So I do think at face value, if you're in these best ball leagues, I think he's a tremendous pick at cost, because even if he's what he is at face value, you're getting value here because he's going to play more snaps. He obviously had the injury last year. When he was on the field, he led the Bills in targets, in target share when he was on the field. And there probably will be a little bit of a rotation with the Bills. They do like to play a lot of these guys. And there was a signal adding Palmer and adding Elijah Moore. We're going to see a little bit of rotation again. But he also led the team in end zone targets. He had 8 end zone targets last year as a rookie, the most on the team, even including his missed time. Through 2 years, Dalton Kincaid has 7 end zone targets. Like, this is a guy that can win in these best ball formats, give those spike weeks, get the touchdown weeks. In season long, I feel like he's still going to be a frustrating player where, like, you're going to be a damned if you don't. Like, he's going to have the 3-game stretch where the Bills don't have a high dropback rate. He's having to win on like 6 targets per game, and you're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna bench him, and then you bench him for the 2 touchdown game. and you're just pissed off. Like, you know, because it's not like best ball is not just about like what you get out of it. It's also like this alleviation we get as fantasy gamers. It's the Jaden Reed and Josh Downs stuff we talked about too. Jaden Reed's the same way. You're gonna have a 4-game stretch this season where Jaden Reed gets 6 targets per game, and you're gonna be like, damn it, like I just haven't got anything out of this guy. I'm gonna put this other guy in this week because he's got a good matchup. I'm gonna chase the matchup, and Jaden Reed's gonna house call like some slant or hit on those posts, and you're gonna be like, you know. And that's how I feel like Keon Coleman's going to be. So I think he's a great best ball pick. I would love to see like the diversity. I would like to see a step forward. I'm probably not going to draft a lot of them when we get to August, just because of, like I said, I feel like he's going to be a player like I'm going to be forced to get right or just leave in my lineup all the time. And I just don't want to play through that.
Yeah, but again, he's going outside the top 50 receivers. Like it's if you take him and by month, you know, the end of the month, you just end up cutting him for some hot waiver wire running back. Like, yeah, you're going to look back and maybe week 5 was the week. You cut him in week 4, but week 5 was the week. You're going to be annoyed about that, but it's not going to like make or break your season.
Last question coming on too before he had the week 12 wrist injury. He was starting to come on, and, you know, you can look at some of the plays that he had, like the big play against the Titans, right, in the second half. But, like, those are plays, like, when we compare him to Big Mike, like, you never would see Big Mike make a play like that.
And again, like, that's kind of why I want him off the line of scrimmage more, because he can get into those routes and really rumble after the catch. Like, that's really where he does shine to me as an after-catch player. On the wrist thing, he was not as consistent as a ball winner as I'd want him to be as a rookie, but maybe you can... Yeah, there were some issues early in the season just because he can be a little bit lax on the tracking details, but if he improves in year 2 and that wrist is healthier, I could see him being like a really dominant 50-50 ball receiver. So that is a good point to throw out with Coleman.
Has any football players play on the football field match their personality more than Keon Coleman?
No. I love his assessment of his rookie season too. What did he say? Like, that sucked or whatever when he went back and watched the film, which is just, I wanted him and Xavier Legette, honestly, who we're not going to talk about here just because like that's really unpacking a lot there with the Panthers in terms of second-year receivers. But those two guys are so engaging from a personality perspective. Like, I really want them to be good. So I really want those guys to be good. I think both of them just take a little bit of role catering to get there.
After you look up on YouTube the conversation me and Matt had on Marvin Harrison, I would implore you to look up the Keon Coleman Niagara Falls commercial.
Yes, it is absolute gold. And then go check out Xavier Legette and Glorilla's music video. So a lot of homework here for the people. I want to get you out of here on this question, Rich, and then we'll throw to the Rome Odunze interview. Just on this 2024 wide receiver class, I mentioned I'm not out on, even if like I do think guys like Harrison or maybe Odunze, Pearsall could maybe break out. They could maybe close this gap in terms of how good these wide receivers are from this 2024 class. And I mentioned but I'm not necessarily out on Neighbors or Thomas or McConkey. Do you have any concerns about any of those 3 guys, or are they total green lights for you where they're going?
I mean, I love Neighbors and I love McConkey. And I want these guys. I just haven't been able to get them based on their cost point because I like other players more at their price points. Like I'm outright, like we didn't really talk about Drake London, but I really think that Drake London has he's a really solid probability to lead the NFL in targets this year. I think especially when you look at like the Atlanta Falcons schedule, especially when you look at the Atlanta Falcons, like opening 8 games, like they're going to have to score. I know they want to be balanced with Michael Penix, but they might not be able to because they face a ton of good offenses, and that defense, man, we don't know. We just don't know. So I think they're just going to be in shootouts. And then you had the Zach Robinson stuff that unlocked Drake London getting those free squares. And then when Michael Penix took over, he had the marriage of the free squares plus the deep stuff.
Yes.
And it really unlocked him. So like I've been just really high on London, so I get him in that area. And then McConkey versus AJ Brown. I've been more either on AJ Brown. I've been really getting Devin Achane in that area. We'll see if Devin Achane eventually just leapfrogs out of that area. But Devin Achane has been, yeah. And
every fantasy analyst has talked about him for the last week. Like every I've heard about
his the Johnny trade was the nail.
Yeah. Well, it's all anyone's talking about. It's all that's happened. But every fantasy analyst I know has mentioned his receptions per game with Tua. Like I've heard it probably 50 times in the last week. So we're going to hear it 100 times by week 1, he will be like a first-round fantasy pick.
And my argument for the Dolphins in general, and again, we could do another show on why I'm more bullish on the Dolphins offense, because I actually think they're going to run the football a lot better than they did last year. And that you have the consensus take that the Dolphins offensive line is trash. I actually think from a run game perspective, it is significantly improved. Obviously, we have James Daniels coming off of an injury. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that all of their offensive linemen outside of left tackle, these guys are movers, and in that system you want guys that can move. They have a center that is an excellent mover in Aaron Brewer, and when you look at Devin Achane, the splits you should care about are splits with and without Austin Jackson last year. That those are the splits you should care about, because they're significantly different. But the Ladd McConkey thing is the toughest for me, right? So from my years of doing this, like anytime you try to like take a player in a small sample, it's like hyper efficient, and you try to tear him down, like usually it's wrong. Like just bet on that player being good. My thing with Ladd McConkey at cost is I try to paint a scenario like where like Ladd McConkey just gets like a lot of targets. And it's hard for me, like for like a round 2 wide receiver, for him to like, it's hard for me to sell a story where he gets like 150 targets, because I think people are taking what happened with the Chargers last year at face value and not really factoring what their signal was. So last year, from before week 8, the Chargers were throwing the ball 5% below expectations, and up into that point, like Ladd McConkey, like really wasn't doing a lot from a fantasy perspective. He had cleared 52 yards just once per week before week 8, and it's not anything of his own doing. You see teams are trying to scheme him away, but then the pass rate over expectation goes up for the Chargers after week 8. The offense opens up, and as default, Ladd McConkey opens up. He averages just under 90 yards per game over his final 10 games after 44.2 per game prior. Again, that's double. And then the fewest yards he had over the game was 52. It was as low. But then when you look at the way the Chargers season ended, right? The Chargers couldn't run the football last year, and they were awful running outside of those opening 2 games that when J.K. Dobbins is breaking long runs. They struggled. Their running backs were 23rd in success rate. They were 28th in yardage gained after contact, and they go to the playoffs. And what happens in the playoffs? They lose a game where their quarterback throws 4 interceptions and they run the ball 18 times for 50 yards. Do you really think that Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman were like, that's the kind of football we want to play? And Ladd McConkey had 200 yards in that game. But do you really think that those two guys looked at each other and said, this is the brand of football we want to play? And then what do they come out and do when the offseason opens up? They throw a bag at Mekhi Becton. They draft Najee Harris. We'll see if he has an eyeball or not. No one knows. And they use a first-round pick on a running back. You're telling me that that's the style, like they want to, they're still telling me that they are still Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. Like they want to run the football a lot while they can. So I think they put a lot of effort into bumping up this efficiency. I think Ladd McConkey is going to be awesome. But I think when you look at the guys he goes around, how do I get to 150 targets with Ladd McConkey? He can still be hyper efficient and make 110 work. He can make 120 work, but you're starting to thread the needle. I'm a volume forward player. Like, I don't want my guys to have to pigeonhole just being elite efficient players. I want my dudes to just be out there and I say, like, this dude's just getting the ball a lot, and I'll let that happen.
I mean, I've compared him to like Tyler Lockett, and that was kind of the needle you had to consistently thread with Tyler Lockett, was like he had to be elite efficient on that volume. And for many years he was, but you never know what's going to happen. I think that I'm probably somewhere in the middle in terms of like what Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to be, because I do think like this is the best quarterback they've ever had. Harbaugh's like obsessed with Herbert. I don't think they'll go full like Kaepernick, early career Lamar Jackson, but there's still like a philosophical thing that they want to abide by. So, Rich, do you think we're wrong about our wide receiver rankings this year, or are we generally like directionally accurate with where we're going?
I think there is wisdom with the crowd. I think fantasy gamers, since I've been doing this, and you can contest this too, like it's such a smarter pool of people playing fantasy football and analyzing football. I think more than less, if you just follow the crowd of analysts, you're probably going to have a North Star that is largely successful. You could still have your favorite analyst mixed in and maybe look for some micro edges within that, top down, consensus types of rankings. I will say, I think that the bucket of guys you hit on, like that wide receiver 2 group, is just so flat and deep. I don't think you just need to be aggressive with the guys that we hit on. I don't think there's any reason to be aggressive with the Garrett Wilsons and try to thread that needle. Even the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, like that bucket just runs so deep of these like I don't want to call them faux wide receiver ones, maybe from a fantasy sense. It's just they're not in that tier. They're not in that list of dudes you put up at the start of the show. And, you can tell yourself a story where like you got guys going way later and like, Tet McMillan and Jerry Jeudy and like just like these guys that could lead their team. You brought up Calvin Ridley. Like these are team wide receiver ones who theoretically from a projection stance could have equal target shares and counting targets to a lot of these players. And you're getting them just at significant arbitrage points in your fantasy draft. So I would say that is one thing I would caution gamers to do is you don't have to get aggressive within that tier. I think it's very arbitrageable, if that even is a word.
It's a podcast word. We'll put it at that. Rich, you're the man. Really appreciate you coming on the show today. Everybody make sure you follow him at Lord Reeves. Check out all of his work at Sharp Football Analysis. He's putting up his tiers right now, which are must read. You got to check those out. And yeah, make sure you're checking out.
I can hook you up too. I got something that I actually forgot because I'm terrible at this. If anyone does like anything I had to say to this point, and you do want to read in, because I have wide receiver tiers, like just in-depth stuff on all these guys. If you guys want to go over Sharp Football Analysis and use the promo code Yahoo, you can get the draft kit for $1. Anyone that made it to this point at the show,
$1. That's nothing. When people are like, it's the price of a cup of coffee, like. No way. That's not you can't even get an espresso for $1. Give me a break. So definitely make sure you take advantage of that. And yeah, Rich's wide receiver tiers are great because he does it a little differently than everybody else. So I would totally endorse checking those out, getting the draft kit for $1. Elite stuff over there. Rich, really appreciate you, buddy. We're going to take a quick break. After that, you'll hear my one-on-one with Chicago Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze. We're going to talk Caleb Williams, how Ben Johnson could unlock him in his offense in 2025, and a lot of just, hey, how young wide receivers adjust to the league, which goes in kind of the theme of this entire conversation. All that coming up after the break, right after this. Very excited to have with us now Chicago Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze here on behalf of Sharpie. Rome, how's it going? How's the summer treating you?
It's been going well, man. Just, training, been out in Orange County a good bit, visiting the fam as well. So it's been good.
Well, hey, if you're out there in Southern California, literally no complaints this time of year, man. This is the nominal vacation time for certainly those of us in the media taking a little step back before training camps begin. But this is really kind of like your guys' only downtime here before ramp up as well, right?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think it's my first year doing it, but I feel like this time is more just kind of continuing the habits you had in OTAs. Kind of after the season, before OTAs and minicamp is really when you get like a break and stuff like that. So yeah, we got a little bit of a break, but also got to get geared up for camp here.
I mean, listen, the break is always like it's a break. You're never you're never totally away from the game. That's for sure. Before we look forward to the 2025 season, I do kind of want to just take a quick look back. Give me a scouting report on your rookie season. What do you think went right? What could have been better, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, it was all right. I feel like, I learned a lot. Obviously, with the parameters of kind of the staff and everything that was going on, I feel like I try to just conduct myself in the best way possible. But, I think I can improve in all facets of the game. When I look back on the film, obviously, route, catches, yard after catch, touchdowns, all those different things. I feel like, was not up to my standard or expectations. So I'm going to continue to work and go get it this year for sure.
What was the biggest level of adjustment going pro from college level?
I think just the mental aspect to it. Obviously you got to be on your details, and the defenders and defensive scheme is very dialed in. So just harping in on all those things, understanding where you need to be when you need to be there, and just the different windows, I feel like was an adjustment. But I feel like everybody is a little bit bigger, faster, stronger, but I feel like the biggest thing is the mental aspect for sure.
Was there one defense that you guys played against where, maybe it was in the preparation before, during the game, or maybe looking back after, you're like, man, they were really, they were tough to play against from a mental standpoint?
Yeah, I would say the Vikings are interesting just because they have so many different kind of defenses that they run and pressures that they bring. So, they provide a different mental aspect to the game for sure. But, we had some success against them. But I feel like, it was definitely a challenge for sure.
I've talked to a lot of wide receivers and some quarterbacks that said the same thing about the Vikings defense over the course of last season. So Brian Flores definitely throws a lot at you guys. I talked to you actually back at the Super Bowl in Media Week. DJ Moore was there as well. So you know this. I do a charting series called Reception Perception where I look at wide receivers on a route-by-route basis. You would really be a big fan of it because you turn out looking really good in this particular methodology. So, but one thing I would say going back and looking at your rookie year, maybe there were some struggles between you and Caleb Williams in like zone coverage, like particularly some of the stuff that you mentioned there, being on the same page, settling down. Is there anything to that? And like, what is something that you guys are working on to maybe improve in that area as a duo?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is just learning this new offense and learning exactly, the spots that they have us kind of connecting on is the biggest thing. I feel like there might have been kind of a disconnection in that last season. So just harping on those things and, trusting one another because, that's what it is at the end of the day. In zone coverage, understanding someone's going to be there and then understanding, Seawell's going to put it right there when he needs to. So I know we both have the capability to. It's just a consistency matter and doing it over and over again. So that way it comes like second nature.
Is Caleb one of those quarterbacks that, hey, like I want you to be, if this route is at this step, that's where I want it. Like I want to tie it all together. Or is he one of those guys more like, hey, I'm going to trust you just if I see you're open, you're there? Because different guys view it in different ways there.
I think he has both perspectives, when it's tough, maybe across the middle or different things, where there's a lot of defenders around, it's definitely specific and he wants us, exactly in the same spot. But I feel like for maybe a 50-50 ball or something on the outside, it's like, hey, I'm going to just go put it up and then go make a play. So I feel like he has kind of that duality that, allows him to be a great quarterback and understand his receivers.
All the best ones do, man. So that makes a lot of sense. Look, again, we mentioned that we talked at Super Bowl Media Week. I'm not sure if you remember this, but it was funny because you, DJ, and I kind of joked about all the questions that you guys were getting about both Ben Johnson, like from a coaching perspective, and also how you guys were going to be deployed in the offense. And we kind of laughed about it because you guys had literally spent 0.0 practice time with him as a coach. Now that you have actually been out there on the grass a little bit, before we touch on some of the deployment stuff, just what's he been like in terms of expectations and demands as a coach?
He's been hard on us, man. He's been hard on us, holding everybody accountable. I don't know if you heard any of the stories about him at practice, but, he's strict and he's detailed. And I love it. I think the team loves it because, that's the sort of standard and accountability that we need to go far. So, he's very dialed in with his offense and he's very, detail orientated and he's very knowledgeable about, offenses, defenses, and the game of football as a whole. So all of us are kind of, soaking up as much information as possible and, taking his coaching, strictly, business-like mentality. So it's been great.
Is there one specific kind of things you can share with me? You don't have to go too deep into like a specific player or anything like that, but just some specific he's given you note-wise, like as a player, hey, Rome, like this is something I noticed with you and you can get better in this area. We can really exploit your skills well in this offense.
I think, just my size, I feel like he's been, harping on just, being a dominant receiver when it comes to, those outside routes and kind of those 50-50 balls, which, I've done previous in my career. So I feel like he harps on those things a lot and, that being a big asset for us in this offense. But, he likes to put people in different positions to succeed. And I think, he's even providing new ways for me that I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. And, for DJ and the wide receiver core as a whole and Caleb and all the weapons. So he provides a unique perspective in that sense.
Well, I think that's really cool to hear because I think on the outside, we talk about Ben's offense as, well, it's really dominated by this type of slot receiver, or it's really dominated by, pass catching running backs out of the backfield, things of that nature. But they never really had a guy with your specific type of skill set as an ex-receiver in Detroit that can just line up on the line of scrimmage and win those kind of boundary routes as a side speed player. So that's interesting to hear that you feel like he's more so leaning into, hey, this is what you do well, so this is how we're going to deploy you in this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, he's very specialized in knowing his players' strengths and their weaknesses. And I think he's, putting all of us in position to, have success so far. So, we're learning each other and learning each other's role in the offense and our part to play. But so far, it's been great.
So there's been a lot of, like I said, talk about who's going to be the slot receiver in this offense. I'm sure you guys are all going to take reps from that position. If you have a preference as Rome Odunze, do you like taking reps from X or slot more?
Man, I don't have a preference, honestly. Wherever the ball is going, that's where I want to be. So that's the only preference I got. But nah, honestly, outside or inside, I feel like, I have the skill set to do both tasks in those sense. But it definitely is a different skill set that kind of each position takes on. But I feel like I can have success at this level on both those fronts.
When you mentioned like the skill sets needed for both spots, what's something that goes into being like a great slot receiver that's maybe less important in terms of being like a great outside receiver?
I think when it comes to slot, it's a lot about, sudden quickness and acceleration is huge, as well as the ability to, create a good amount of separation, I feel like is needed for the inside routes. For the outside routes, it is too, but it's a more physical game, I would say. A lot of more hands-on corners and more corners with size rather than the nickels that are playing guys in the slot. So those are factors as well. And, you don't have as much space to, get open on the outside. On the inside, you kind of got more, ability to, have some freedom. So, yeah.
And that's what feels so cool about this offense is that, again, I think everybody's going to get some reps out of the slot. If you had to ask me for my uneducated opinion, you're on the inside there. You're actually doing it. So it sounds like we're sort of viewing that the same way here. Before we get you out of here and we talk about Sharpie, just quick question on your college quarterback, Michael Penix, who is going to be, it looks like, the full season starter for the Atlanta Falcons. I'm a big Drake London fan. I've been tracking his game for a while, and I really am excited to see Michael Penix unfurl some deep balls to Drake London for over the course of a full season, man. What do the people have to look forward to watching Michael Penix down there in Atlanta?
Yeah, no, you and me both, man. I'm looking forward to it. Mike is, one of a kind. He's super talented. He's a great dude. They named a street after him now down there in Tampa now in Day City, Florida. So, he's awesome, man. He's very talented and he works hard at it. So I'm excited to see their connection with Drake and Mooney and all the guys over there. Them finally, have him as the, full-time guy there. So I think they expect greatness, honestly. Every time he steps on the field, it seems like he's spewing greatness. So, lots of touchdowns, lots of, receiving catches. He might run for a few too. He doesn't like to run too much, but he might run for a few. And, but yeah, I'm excited for them over there for sure.
That's got to feel good as a receiver when, look, there's some great quarterbacks in the league that are scrambling quarterbacks. It's like, hey, if it's not there 1, 2, 3, I'm out of there. But as a receiver, you got to kind of like the guys who are like, all right, I'll hang on to the very last minute before I let that thing rip. And I feel like Caleb's kind of cut from that same cloth as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're out there risking our bodies for sure. So they're doing the same thing back there, and you got to have a lot of respect for them when they're getting chased by 300-pounders. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different, but yeah, no, it's definitely a kind of a sacrifice sort of thing on both fronts. But yeah, when you have a guy that's willing to do that, you're ready to go to war with him for sure.
Well, Rome, you're here on behalf of Sharpie. Let the people know what you got going on with them.
Yeah, so year 2 with Sharpie, me and Mike were the rookie of the years last year. So we're kind of passing the pen over to Ashton Denty and T-Mac, ready for their rookie season and the greatness they're about to have, and great season. So I'm looking forward to watching those guys. And yeah, coming up on year 2 now, kind of the anniversary of my first signing of my contract. So did that with the Sharpie S gel, and we'll hopefully be doing that a couple more times with the Sharpie S gel in the future. But yeah, I use it for my notepad. I use it for everything. So it's all reliable, just how I'm trying to be this season. But yeah, shout out Sharpie.
Well, hey, listen, I've had a couple conversations with you now. You're a humble guy. You don't have to go out there and say this. I'll say it. Big things coming for Rome Odunze this year, coming for his career. So I imagine you and that Sharpie are going to be very tight, signing many, many deals here going forward. So, Rome, really appreciate the time today, man. Good luck to you this season. Stay healthy and go out there and crush it, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you, man.
That is going to do it for us today. Shout out to Rich Hribar and Rome Odunze, two just awesome players in their individual field, for joining this show today. On Tuesday, we will be back. We're going to continue Contrarian Corner mini-series by asking the question, what if the second-year quarterbacks that we're all really excited about, what if they suffer a sophomore slump? Underdog's Josh Norris joins me for the pod to discuss that. You don't want to miss it. Until then, we are out.